Hey, hello guys. Thank you so much for being here. It's really nice seeing everyone watching this important topic. We just talk a little bit about RAG and MCP and bring a vision a little bit more about business and architecture, what is the right choice, right? So before we start, just who here has been using RAG nowadays? Okay, and MCP, yeah, 50-50 I'd say, yeah. But nowadays MCP is more popular, right? But you need to address some situations and understand how can you make like a best choice for your architecture or for your customer. So we're gonna talk a little bit of why it's matter, right? The definition, like really simple about RAG and MCP. We're gonna talk about your choices, the tools that you have on AWS to run MCP and RAG, or how to design architecture. And we'll do a comparison like side by side. And the most important is, the idea is bring a decision framework that can help you, okay, in your company. So why it matters? Nowadays, data is the base for all the AI stuff, all the generative AI. And it is accelerating, evolving rapidly. And more people are using RAG. And nowadays, MCP is so popular and people are using a lot of MCP. So you need to understand exactly what you need to use. That's a key choice when you design architecture to your customer or inside your company, and you need to know exactly what you're gonna use. It involves a couple of risks like complexity, cost, and security especially, okay? And again, the goal here is to bring a decision framework for you. So what choice do you have? RAG and MCP. RAG is a Retrieval-Augmented Framework. It's mostly used to enhance your LLMs and work with your enterprise data. So you have a knowledge base, you have specific documents, you have your databases, and you'd like that the LLM work just with that data. You can reduce hallucinations in this case, and you can keep answers aligned with your specific scenario in your company. Usually it's better for its search, for Q&A, knowledge base. So MCP is the Model Context Protocol. It's basically to standardize all the communications between agents, right? It creates a pattern like the HTTPS, like the OData, all the communication protocol. So it's more used for the LLMs as a tools. They need to take actions. They need to execute some actions. You can also read data, but it's usually for other tools, okay? And usually it's better for automation, for system integrations, and tools that are to connect with your agents. What options we have on AWS? So here is just stack is just an example. It's not an architecture. You have more tools than that you can use. It really depends on the scenario that we'd like to design or the problem that we're trying to solve. But here you have a couple of tools on AWS that you can use to design your RAG architecture, and you have a couple of tools that you can design your MCP or use your MCP's server. Again, you can use one or another. You don't need to use all of this. We can go and see some examples here. So here is a really basic example about RAG. All architectures that I'm showing here, they are available on AWS as a reference architecture or on the documentation. And here you have basically a user accessing a RAG application, talking to your LLM, and you have a vector database and all your documents, data, media, or whatever you need, okay? That's exactly what RAG does inside your knowledge base and your information here. Here is also RAG, but with a little bit more complex architecture, different scenarios here that you can use in your models or in your company. You can use open source, you can use LangChain, here you can use Bedrock. So it really depends on how you design your system or how you would like to solve your problem, okay? Here's a reference architecture for MCP. So MCP, you can use Fargate, Lambda, all the authentication. Now, all the other services on AWS that you use to support your MCPs, but it's like a base architecture, a little bit more complex. But again, takes action and do much more stuff in this case. Here is a little bit more complex architecture, but in this case, using agent core, right? So here you have all the agent core runtime, running your MCP services, and connecting with other AWS services or external services here. You have memory and your other Bedrock services. So we have a little understanding about architecture, and we understand how RAG works and MCP works. So the idea is doing a comparison between them. So again, RAG is primarily for retrieval data, just read only. You're not taking actions, right? It's the content is like relatively static. The policies in your company, documents, your risk tolerance is a little bit low, and it's a quick time to value to implement. So the complexity is not so high, and you can implement it a little bit faster. MCP usually is used for your AI agents to interact with other tools. Maybe they need to connect with another services like Salesforce or any other services to take actions, and you can use MCPs. Usually for, again, for automations, workflows, or orchestration against systems, okay? Here is some common use cases that you can use with RAG. You can use for document search, for example, or have a policy Q&A. Again, this is all documents that you have and you would like to access your knowledge database chat. That's each one of these use cases has a different architecture, and you can use different services, but basically RAG is recommended for this kind of services. When you talk about MCP, again, you will see more automation, monitoring, integration with other systems, API orchestration, workflow trigger, or even DevOps automation. So MCP will give you a lot of tools and more power to your application or your LLM to talk to other systems. Okay, one important thing about this comparison is exactly about cost. So I bring here just a comparison. Again, can be really different depending on your architecture. I'm giving an example about 10,000 carries day or 10,000 workflows day, using vector here, embedding, LLM interference. On MCP tools, you have more tools or function executions here, and you can see that the price really changed. So that's why you need to understand, especially about cost, what kind of architecture you should use. Or you should use even a hybrid architecture, right? So here is a decision framework that you can use when you think about what kind of architecture I would like to implement. Again, RAG alone, it's basically to provide information from your documents, from your knowledge base, your database that you'd like to retrieval information based on that context, right? It's perfect for read-only information. MCP, it's more simple and isolated actions without a complex business context. So if you don't need a business context, you don't need your documents, you can use MCP. But now, you can use the hybrid architecture. You can use both, right? Because you can have your business context in your RAG, and you can use MCP as a tool to access everything. So it's best for intelligent workloads or workloads that need to take some action or communicate with other systems. There's a couple of strategy talking about cost that you can adopt. So first, use prompt caching, because you don't need to send prompts every time or spend money with tokens. You need to reduce the count of tools that you use with MCP, because if you have a lot of MCPs server working with a lot of tools inside, it will multiply your costs every time you execute an action. So that really needs to be really well designed in this case. Use batch operations. You can use process a lot of things at the same time, and you reduce your cost. And it's really important to implement a smart routing that you can make a decision between using MCP or RAG without using LLM, before using LLM, right? It will reduce the cost. So in a simple way, you can just ask, do I need knowledge ground? You can use RAG. Do I need two orchestration or actions? MCP. Do I need both? Hybrid. And ever consider cost, latency, and governance in this case, right? And talking about the hybrid scenario, you can see again the comparison in costs about between these three architectures, all right? You can see that the MCP alone, consider this thing 10,000 workflows a day, it's really more expensive. And here, if you implement all the cost strategy, you have a really good scenario for the same kind of architecture, okay? Again, it really depends on your problem, how you design your system, but that's a fair comparison between these three architecture, okay? All right, some key takeaways to wrap up what we're talking about. Again, RAG is very good for your knowledge base. MCP is really popular right now because he is making all the LLMs or agents really powerful, accessing everything, but you have to care about costs, about security. It's a little bit more complex, so you need to really think about it. But now, again, if you need a balance between power and complexity, you can use both, okay? And AWS provides a lot of tools, as we see, like you can construct like building blocks, and you can put both architectures together, right? So that's it. I would like you guys to connect with me. Here's all my social media, LinkedIn, YouTube. I'm always posting content about AI, LLMs, and you can connect with me. Thank you so much.